Hi there! For those of you just joining, my name is Jennifer. I'm a former behavior analyst turned plant medicine integration coach. That is a mouthful. For myself personally, I've struggled with my own mental health over the course of about 25 years out of my life. I have a diagnosis of ADHD, and I suffered with depression and anxiety myself over the course of those years. So naturally, when it was time for me to choose a career, instead of working on myself, I got into the science of wanting to help people make their lives better. Completely ignoring my own issues and just sort of focusing on others. But it got to a point where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. So as I mentioned, some of the stuff I've struggled with in my life, I think a lot obviously related to my own diagnoses. At first it was undiagnosed and I didn't know that I had ADHD. I just knew that I had a lot of self-loathing. I struggled with suicidal ideation for a great many years out of that 25 years. Lots of anxiety and lots of depression. So as I mentioned, here I am practicing and trying to help other people improve their quality of life. Meanwhile, I was silently suffering and on an inward spiral. One sort of sad, lowest day of my life, I had sort of reached what I felt like was the end. I had tried everything. I had been in therapy. I knew all of this stuff. I had been helping people all this time. Why couldn't it work for me? And I sort of started receiving signs and messages, I guess you could say, from the universe that I should try plant medicine, otherwise known as ayahuasca. And that was 3 years ago. So that was definitely a life-altering experience. It was absolutely beautiful. I went to a gorgeous place. I was well supported, well informed. And so when I came home, I understood, especially from my own clinical background, that I couldn't just sort of leave everything that happened at the retreat and just have that be the end of it for me. I started to recognize that throughout my life, while I was absolutely helping others and making others' lives better, I completely abandoned myself. And it was time that I turned that around and I started to take everything that I knew and that I understand about the quality of life, about human wellness, that I needed to start actually applying it to myself. And it was like this consciousness was now just awake in me, and I could just see all of my poor patterns and, like I said, all of the ways that I had abandoned myself with things like not eating a healthy diet, not exercising, not taking quality time to truly just turn inward and get to know myself, something that Gabor Mate calls compassionate self-inquiry, to start to notice all of your habits, smoking cigarettes heavily, drinking heavily, and just really a lot of toxic relationships where I allowed myself to be in a position where being taken advantage of was quite a regular thing. And I just abandoned, I don't blame the other people, I just abandoned myself instead of expressing boundaries and saying, no, I don't want to do that, or I'm not comfortable with that. I just would go along with it. And so that is something that I had to start to change because, as I said, ayahuasca makes you abundantly aware of the ways that you abandon yourself. You do try to go back to your old habits, as we do, our default mode. I've talked about this in a previous video. But over time, as I said, you have this now awakening, this connection to your higher self, to source, just telling you and showing you as you engage in those self-abandoned behaviors, you have this little voice now that is so loud that you just can't ignore it. It starts to make yourself feel sick because you think, my God, how could I just abandon myself? And with that, this sense of love starts to grow within yourself as you start to take care of yourself. And I realized that I didn't have a proper nurturing as a young child, so I didn't really understand the concept of self-love. So people have explained it to me where, when a parent nurtures and cares for a child, not just by saying I love you and giving you cuddles, but by providing them the basic needs, providing them with great food, with comfortable, safe home with love, affection, attention, guiding them, scaffolding them, and teaching them throughout life that kind of care and support to take care of their own bodies with things like personal hygiene. That in itself, that love and care that that parent is giving is telling that child, you are worthy of love, and it's supposed to turn into an intrinsic sense of self-love. So, oh, I am worthy of this care. My parents showed me that, and now through that reflection, I'm going to start to take care of myself, and so on and so on, and it passes on to every generation. So that is in an ideal, wonderful circumstance, and I believe there are people out there who have that childhood, and that's fantastic. But a lot of us, I'm not saying that I know the numbers, but within my experiences and my work obviously drew people towards me that didn't have that early experience. And so for myself personally, I didn't have that type of nurturing. So I absolutely had no clue how to take care of myself. And I can now happily say that as I'm on the second half of my life, I'd like to think, the next chapter, I'd like to think there's going to be more phases of my life, but this next chapter is all about me nurturing myself in all of those tiny ways. And it's taken 3 years to get to this place with a lot of work, a lot of ups and downs. It definitely was not, a linear path of upward trajectory. It was, up and down, up and down, up and down, wanting to give up, just go back to those old habits. But then you have that voice and also this new sense of self-worth where, this, as a behavior analyst, we always examine motivation and what motivates people. And there's something within the field that we can't measure, which is intrinsic motivation. So just that sense of wanting to do it for yourself because it's something that they can't define really. But now I understand it because I've experienced it on a personal level. And intrinsic motivation, however I turned it on, I think was through, plant medicine opening up my brain, and then just me starting to practice that self-care and self-love and nurturing and showing myself. I was parenting myself essentially in such a kind and loving way, and getting to know myself, as I've mentioned, through journaling practices. So standing on the outside of myself and looking in, like caring for a child, like, oh dear Jen, you just didn't know any better, and this is why you did all of these things. And just instead of getting mad at myself, so again, without knowing my diagnosis of ADHD, I used to get very frustrated with my brain and how it was so hard to activate in certain areas, and how I would create lots of exhaustion and low moments because I didn't know how to control my hyper focus. So it would be like 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm working on something and I have to work the next morning, and then I just want to, not be alive anymore because I'm so friggin' exhausted. Just anyways, endless patterns that were so toxic. And I used to get angry at myself when I would notice them. And now I take a look and I examine myself as that was me surviving. I didn't know any better. And now as I've learned, my ADHD is definitely not gone. You'll learn that through the series as I go off on tangents or forget what I was saying or these kinds of things, but I definitely understand myself better. And so I can now better utilize it as a superpower. So I know how to control when I hyper focus. I know how to use things that go outside of that dopamining that ADHD does. Like, so people with ADHD, we chase moments of immediate gratitude. So they call it dopamining. We're chasing the dopamine, which of course is a beautiful experience. But when you start to manage other emotions that come from hard work that are not immediately gratifying, you start to sort of retrain that part of your brain. So yes, they work very well together. While there are times, as I said, you'll see my ADHD just takes over again because, that's a part of who I am, and it will always be a part of who I am. And anyways, the whole point of this is now I can love and appreciate that side of me and continue on this healing journey of mine. And so I mentioned suicidal ideation, and I'm happy to report for the last 3 years, I have never been more happy to be here on this planet. And the idea of that is just, I look back at who she was, that former version of myself, and I just want to hold her and cuddle her and say, I'm so sorry that you ever felt that way. But it wasn't, I will always say this, it's not just my, those epic experiences with sitting with the mother, with ayahuasca, and all of the care that I experienced on the retreat. It was all the work that came afterwards that that is also a pivotal part. So as I've said before, it might be a little cheesy, but the ceremony is just the beginning of your journey. And I'm not saying that I'm fixed and everything is hunky-dory. As I said, life is ebb and flow. And I've realized that being awake, being conscious, being in a state of wellness is a state, and it's something that we have to keep returning to because, especially in this world filled with distractions and immediate gratification, slowly bad habits can creep in, and you want to just manage all of that. So long story short, that's who I am. And as I said, because I've experienced being at my lowest and not wanting to exist in my own body and on this planet anymore, and now that I've had this experience and I know the work that it took and I documented it all, the clinical side of myself couldn't help it. I want to share all of that with other people who've experienced plant medicine because I just want to make sure that you don't give up on yourself, you don't give up on your journey. And I also want to mention that I'm not saying that plant medicine is the answer for everybody because I don't think that it is. I think everyone is built very differently, and you need to learn to listen to your intuition somehow to know that that is the right decision for you. But I will say, after you've experienced it, your mind is in a different place, and why not put in some tools and some strategies to help make sure that all of those benefits that you've experienced are long-term benefits and they stick around. So anyways, that's it for today. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope you stick it out as I share, my trials and triumphs and all of the things that have come along the way. I've also published a book about my experiences, so you can check that out in the video description or on the channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you think that what I'm about to share and as I go on this journey, if it's worthwhile. All right, so as I say, the most important relationship you have is the one with yourself. So be good to yourself. Thanks. No, that's not how I want to get into that. Naturally, always. I don't even know where I'm looking.